I'm going to be covering what the source box is today because I think it's really important that we understand that I actually really do need it. It's my own personal space inside of FamilySearch.org that they've allowed me to store sources there in case I ever need to go back and reuse them. So when I'm on FamilySearch.org, it doesn't matter really where I'm at inside of these areas, whether I'm in the tree searching for records and memories. I will always see my name sitting here on the right, and when I click on my name it says source box. So when I click on that, it takes me to my own personal source box area. It's a great place for me to store sources that I've actually created myself, or maybe I've pulled them from another website and I choose to pour it into my source box too, because anybody inside a family tree can go in and detach my sources at any time they want. But if I had that source correctly attached and I need to go reattach it, it is a really big pain to have that happen unless I have had it stored in my source box. And so that's why I really feel this place is so important for us to learn about, is to make life much easier when we're trying to reattach sources that may have got detached. Okay, we're going to start here at the top. Under Home, you can see that it shows I have 17 sources in my home area, which is all these sources right here. So as I've attached sources to my ancestors and click on a little box that says add this to my source box, this is where they end up, is in this home area. Once they're in this home area, I can then go organize them into folders. So here, if I click on all, this is all the sources, including those 17 that I have inside my source box. But I like to keep them organized into folders. So you can see here on the left, I've chosen to put my folders in to this area by last names. So here you can see my Anselm line. I have 9 sources in here. Next to each name, you can see how many sources sit inside those folders. As of right now, we're only allowed to have up to 50 folders, which makes it really hard on those of us who like to name these folders with our ancestors' last names. Another option is I have a friend who chooses to make a folder and just call it A, and then he puts all his ancestors with the last name of A into that folder. And you can go through the whole alphabet because there's only 26 letters and we're allotted 50 folders, and so that may be an easier way for you to start using your source box. The only sources that I actually put into my source box are the ones that I personally have created or that are coming from a website outside of FamilySearch.org. And the reason for that is they're much harder to get back onto my ancestors if somebody detaches them, as where if I find a source out of FamilySearch and attach it into the tree, those are much easier to reattach. And that way I'm not having to store tons and tons of these sources all the time. But you can have up to 10,000 sources that you store inside your source box, which can be really helpful. So when I'm attaching sources to my ancestors' personal detail page, there is a little box that asks me if I want to put it into my source box. And if I put a check mark into that, it ends up in this home area. And then it's up to me to go organize it. When I'm ready to start organizing these sources into folders, I may need to create a new folder. So let's just learn how to do that. I click on Create New Folder, and I'm just going to create this Schneider. And yes, I still do it with last names because that is my favorite way to organize it. And so I'm hoping one day they give us more than 50 folders. After I've typed in the name, I'll click on the little green check mark, and it threw me into that folder. That's why you saw those names disappear. I'm now in that Schneider folder. And if I scroll down here to Schneider, you can see that it says 0. That's why my screen is blank. So let's go back up to the top, and I'll click on Home here, and this brings me back to all the sources I have not organized yet. So the most efficient way for me to do this when I'm working with a lot of folders is, you can see I've got 3 different coal hops sitting in here, maybe more even. I guess I do have more than just 3. I can click on all of them, and then I can say Move, and I'll go down to that coal hop and I'll move all of them at once. If I'd rather just like left click and drag, I can. So if I see this coal hop, I can actually left click and make the machine scroll down for me. It is actually a little harder to do this, and I can drop it right into that folder. So those are your 2 ways of getting your sources into different folders. So once again, for me, I like to just put a check mark next to the source itself, click on Move, and then go find the last name that I want it to go into, and it moves it for me. Sometimes when I've decided just to left click, drag it over, I've accidentally put it in the wrong folder. So I've learned to stop doing that. I just put the little check mark next to it and go move it that way. Something else to be aware of is I also have the ability to rename or delete my folders. If I come down here to this folder here and click on it, it then brings up this little drop down arrow, and when I click on that I can rename it or I can remove it. So when I remove it, it just leaves. It's gone. So that's just a quick, easy way to get rid of those. Another thing to be aware of is that your sources will show in the order that you created them. So whenever I go to put a source into my source box, it will always end up here at the top on my home page. And even when I'm in my folders, the top one is always the newest source I've added, and it goes down to the oldest one that I've added. By default, the computer organizes these folders in alphabetical order, just so you know that. Okay, now I want to jump into showing you why this source box is going to be so important to you. So I just started playing around with sources on my grandma just so you could see this, and I knew I could go back and fix what I've done to her. She had a 1910 census attached to her, so I'm going to scroll down to that area. And I decided, okay, let's just go play with this, detach it. It was from FamilySearch. You can tell because it had a tree next to it. All these trees are from FamilySearch. These other ones are from other websites. These little dark little book things are from ones that I actually created. But after detaching that source, I went up to this area called Latest Changes, and I clicked on Show All. When you go to that, it actually shows this last source that I detached, and there's no ability to reattach it right here. So that's one reason it's like, oh man, this is going to be really hard to get done. But because it came from FamilySearch, it is a little bit easier than when it actually came from a different website or it's one you created. So what you have to do is you got to click on this blue link, and then it brings you to this edit page inside here, to where I then have to go to the web page. Over here under latest changes, you'd think that it would say restore in there. And it actually does when I click on show all. Let me just jump in there really quick so you can see this. It actually does give me the ability to restore, but that is not the one that I detached. You can see right here that this URL is actually different from this other one up here, and the one I detached had that ARK in it. And so that isn't even the page that I detached. So I knew that I had to do it a different way to get the proper one attached again. So the correct way of doing this is literally clicking on this link that says go to the web page. And as I do that, it's going to bring me back up to that page where I have the ability to attach this to Georgia again. When I click on attach to family tree, you can see that it's going to bring up her family members, and that word detach is sitting next to her family members because it's already attached to them. Next to her it says compare. So then I would literally have to go right back in here and type in my whole reason statement again so that I can then attach this. When I come back into George's detail page and click on sources, you can see that source that was detached. I've put it back with her, and then I can move it back in place. So that example wasn't actually too bad to get back restored because that source came from FamilySearch.org. But it's a little harder when I've created the source myself or it came from a different website. I also detached a source that I had originally put on her. It was her driver's license. So let's go back to this latest changes to this show all. And down here, right here is that driver's license. You can see over to the right, I have no ability to restore this source. So I have to click on this blue link, and when I do that, it brings me out to this area. And even when I click on show all over here, I have no ability to restore this whatsoever. I don't even have an ability in this area. So the only thing I have now as an option is I hopefully have saved it in my source box to where I can go reattach it, or I have to rescan that driver's license and start all over from the beginning and recreate a brand new source. Let's jump back over to my source box and hope that that source is sitting inside there. So coming back in here, her last name was Williams at the time. When I click on that and scroll down these sources, there's that driver's license that I originally had put in there. Over on the right, you can see these paper clips mean that those sources are already attached but because that says attach, I can then make that happen. So we'll go put a check mark in that box and click attach, and now it's going to ask me for a reason statement. I put that in and say attach. And thank heavens that wasn't too hard because I had it in my source box. Had I not, that wouldn't have been very fun. Let's go jump back over to George's detail page, scroll down to those sources, and you can see that driver's license is at the top. Now I'm just going to left click and drag it down into its place and let it go. So now I feel better that my grandma's all put back together. I just want to show you one last area of how even when a source comes from a different website, I have to then go reattach it from my source box. When I come up to a different ancestor now, for this video, I actually went in and detached a source that had come from Ancestry.com. So I detached a census record. When I click into his latest changes under Show All, it brings me to this area where it shows that I've detached this source, and I purposely wanted it detached anyways because it was a duplicate. But I want to show you how it doesn't even say that I can restore it. And when I click on that blue link, it brings me into this area, and it doesn't matter whether I click on Show All or even go to the web page, I have no ability to reattach it this way. I literally need to go back into my source box and see if I've saved it there and resave it or reattach it to Marcus Cale, or I have to start from the very beginning and just go back into the actual website and reattach it that way. Let me just jump back into my ancestor really quick and just reiterate the fact that when you're adding sources from other websites such as Find My Past, MyHeritage, Ancestry.com, or you create the source yourself, always choose to save it to your source box just in case it gets deleted, or I should say detached from your ancestor, and you need to reattach it at some point. But also too, sometimes those sources that you put in your source box, you may need to attach those particular sources to multiple people, and it makes it really easy when you've saved it in your source box. The program I'm using to record this video is not working with me right now very well, and so I'm going to end this video. I really hope you understand now the need for the source box and how to use it. Thank you so much for joining me today.